All right, folks, here we are. Can you hear me? David Schuster can hear me. That's a good sign. Schuster hears some voices sometimes, you know. That's when he's big capper here. So. All right, let's get ready for a great show. Look at all this kind of folks we have here. You have muted your mic, David. Wasn't me. Good afternoon, Ronald. Deborah. Welcome back, folks. Here we are again, another fine rainy Wednesday here in the Queen City. Radio City, baby, Cincinnati. I will be joined in the present moment, absolutely right now, faster than a speeding bullet or a really quick train, though trains in the United States really go slow if you go to Europe and Japan and stuff. So, I mean, it's not much to brag about. But David is still faster. The great, the Emmy Award winning, the awesome, the guy who never gave up his principles for a book or a big contract, David Schuster.
Cliff, it is great to be on with you. I especially love this topic. And just a little technical issue. Am I too far away? Do I need to scoot in? I sometimes feel like I need to be a little bit closer.
Well, not so where you are right now, I think is similar to me. If you get you could get a little closer, maybe. If you care about being exactly where I am, maybe I'm so close I'm scaring people. So you have to keep that in mind too. But everybody's saying hello here, which you probably could see. Lefty Gramps, one of our regulars from Ohio. He suffers like I do here. Don't hold it against Schuster that he went to the University of Michigan, okay?
That's right. I have nothing but respect for Ohio State, even though I hate their guts. It's sort of like when you're in a rivalry with somebody, only the people in that rivalry can truly appreciate it. And I do appreciate Ohio State, even if I hate the Buckeyes.
Fair enough. I'm going to invite Tony in 1 second, who's here too for just a few minutes, I think, as long as we can get him before he goes drunken karaokeing. But the thing about that whole thing, like that pal of yours produced that documentary that was so funny. That was before I knew you, David. And I remember seeing you in it. I'm like, that's David Schuster from TV. And then I knew that there was a Cleveland Plain Dealer reporter I knew because I did PR. I can't think of his name right now. And he was in it too, of course, on the Ohio State side. And you guys it was all Michigan versus Ohio State bashing. The only thing I will say about the whole thing is this. I'm not from here, as you said. Cincinnati, just because we have UC here and Louisville is not that far south and University of Kentucky, you don't get the Ohio State craziness here. Also, Miami, great school, or much of my wife's family has gone to. They're not in the same division. They're not as good, though when they had Ben Roethlisberger for a few years, they were. But because of that, like Cincinnati doesn't get as into that. But I had to, my first gig when I first came to Ohio, where I stopped off in Columbus before coming to Cincinnati, was I got this special gig where the Democrats, this will let you know how long ago it was, were aiming to take back the state house. And we could actually do that with like 5 victories on election night. It was 2008, and there's a guy named Obama at the top of the ticket. And we went to the party, and so I stayed in Columbus for a bit because I was tasked with running this special group to try and get earned media everywhere to sort of damage these Republican candidates. And we did it. One of the last big victories in Ohio. We won back the state house. But I tell you that story because I lived in Columbus for a little bit. I think 2.5 years, because that was the run of that cycle before moving here. And even though I wasn't part of the whole thing, it actually turned me off. And I apologize to all of you folks, because I may say the same thing. Or maybe I'd say the same thing if I lived in Ann Arbor. I don't know. But the way on every game day, if you were not wearing Buckeye red, literally were considered a traitor. Like every restaurant, every waiter, all of them. And so I actually went in the other direction because of that. I'm like, this feels cultish to me.
It is cultish. It's like it's a religion. It's like a secular religion, as I think they said in that documentary, The Rivalry, which was so well put together. And one of the things that I also love is I think it was one of the Ohio State guys in that documentary, which I think it came out 2007, 2008, was that
Aaron
In
Marshall.
Columbus, Ohio, there are 9
dealer.
radio stations, and on game day, every single one is broadcasting the Ohio State football game. And that, Columbus doesn't have ballet, it doesn't have symphony, it doesn't have a major league sports team. It has the Ohio State University and the Buckeyes. And so everybody wears their hoodies and their Buckeye sweatshirts on game day, and off you go.
I think that's part of it. I remember that it was Aaron Marshall who was the one who was the head of the Cleveland Plain Dealer reporter. I don't know if you ever came across him. They probably interviewed you at different times in different places, but that was, I mean, to me, that was sort of the thing, is Columbus is a different beast because of what you said. Cincinnati, the river towns like Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh were founded so much earlier and were like sort of a big deal in the mid 19th century. And so because of that, they had a lot of money and philanthropy that was put into names you've heard, like Carnegie and Mellon and these kinds of people. So money was put into the arts and and they got professional sports teams because they were big when bigger cities when that was going on. And so it's different. As you said, Columbus, because of that limitation, you've got you've got basically a huge big state government. I don't mean that in a bad, I'm not saying that in a Republican way. It should get bigger probably to help more people. But you've got a state government and you've got Ohio State, and so in any case, didn't mean to get into this whole thing. Hello, Tony.
Tony. Hey, Tony, I got to give you a shout out because I actually, in one of the videos that I just put together, I used part of your Substack. You had a tale of two Americans and sort of the choice between Trump and the Pope and what this sort of means. And it was so eloquent and so well done that I thought, I can't say this any better than Tony's already written it. So I just said it and I gave you credit.
Look at that.
But speaking of religion,
Dave has never said that to me before, Tony. So
really? Well, don't get too peanut butter and jealous. Here's the thing: is that I grew up Catholic, and I actually, when I grew up, John Paul II was the leader of the Catholic Church at that time. Now we know a lot about John Paul II now that isn't as good as what the image of him was in the 80s and the 90s. But he was a rock star, like a total rock star. And I guess when this Pope was elected, Louis XIV, this Prevost, the current Pope.
Not Louis XIV. That was a different dude.
Oh, excuse me.
Leo, yeah.
Louis XIV was the sun god, and he was a bit of a dick, and probably the reason there was a French Revolution.
But that is a great mistake, though.
Isn't it amazing? A couple letters off, and the whole thing changed.
Right, well, that happens.
You were close enough as far as I'm concerned.
It happens. But the current Pope, I think, and I think Steve Bannon said it the other day, and I talked about it yesterday on my show, how the conclave was rigged for the papacy. And I'm like, well, yeah, like, duh, which one hasn't been rigged? Like, that's the whole point of the bishop cardinals, of them picking their Pope and their leader. I'm like, yeah, it's rigged. That's like the opposite of what we want to have here, where the people actually get a say, not the oligarchs, are the leaders, the rulers of the institution. The nice part is that the Catholic Church really doesn't have a lot of political sway on a certain population. It does a little bit, but it has more influence than really political power over people.
The irony is it has less influence in the country that surrounds it, because having been to Italy and having to be one of my favorite countries, they are the least Catholic Catholics like out there. So it's sort of hilarious in a way.
But the history, and I guess that's kind of was my thinking, is that when I was a kid, I had never when I was growing up, heard anyone say anything bad about John Paul II. And one of the reasons is he was a rock star, but the other reason why is because they intentionally picked him after John Paul I, and I believe he was alive for like 2 weeks or something. He was the Pope, and then he had a heart attack, and then he was dead, right? So, and then the conclave picks John Paul II, but he was picked outside this norm of Italian popes, and he was picked at a time where Poland was being oppressed by the Soviet communists. And there
was a message.
Yeah, it was one of the first things that John Paul II did, was go to Poland. Now that's where a lot of my heritage comes from. And he stood, and when he was talking about the oppression, the population, it was a huge crowd, and they started chanting in Polish, "We want God, we want God, we want God." And the story goes that the Pope's handlers said, "Oh, it's time to stop. This is really bad. Like we are in a heavily communist country, and you are basically a front to the enemy and to the power structure here." And he said, "No, this is what I came for. This is what I came for." And
Can I ask you a question?
yeah,
So, and you may know the answer to this too, David. This is history stuff, and I should know this, but I know, I remember, I can't remember even what it was called, but when they reformed the church with the updated teachings, that David and I weren't particularly responsible for killing Jesus. I mean, like maybe we were somewhere in the neighborhood, but we weren't like,
okay.
we weren't the ones planning it. Like
Right.
if you watch The Passion of the Christ and all of the Jews, there's like.
Did it say that in there? David Schuster, Cliff Schechter, the Jews.
Yeah. Well, they're just always hissing like noises like Jews were
Right.
snakes, and like
Right.
I made myself watch The Passion of the Christ because I felt like I had to know what good old Mel was saying, even when he wasn't drunk on the highway, saying Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. And women couldn't be priests, but women, I think, were given, and obviously abortion wasn't accepted, but women were given some more equal rights. I think they weren't condemning women for working outside the home anymore. They were a little more tolerant of gay rights, not anywhere close. Like, was that Pope John Paul II? Because he was around for a decent period of time, right? Didn't it happen in the 60s?
He was.
there yet?
It was 1978, I believe. This is before I was born when he was actually elected by that conclave.
Was he in 78?
That's when he was elected.
Then it wasn't him, because it happened, I believe, in the 60s.
Right.
So whoever the Pope was, because that's before I was born. So I don't know.
Now, John Paul II really, I mean, he didn't wade too much into the social justice waters other than the abortion issue. It's very clear where John Paul II stood on abortion and what he believed that the Catholic Church's stance should be. But he made clear what his view of authoritarianism, in particular Soviet communism, was. And he drove out the Soviet communists of Poland at the time with words, not with war, which was very significant. And the reason why it was significant is, one, a pope had never been seen like John Paul II, right? Like they were at the Vatican, and they held the papacy, and they, they would give orders down through the Catholic Church, and the cardinals and bishops would carry out those, whatever the papacy would say. And they had their own radio, they had their own broadcasting up to that point, so they had a lot of influence.
Is this what your piece was about, Tony, that he took?
Yeah. Well, no, not
sure, because I don't even know.
Not necessarily. No, it was about two leaders, and really my piece was about, is this new pope going to do what John Paul II did? Will he do that? Will he use that institution of the church to challenge the ideas of Trump and
these? I think he already has. That's quite. I want to let David in for a second.
I like that. I mean, the other part about Tony's piece, which I love, is America, the world has sort of a choice between two American leaders right now. So we have the choice between Donald Trump and the narcissism and the vanity and the meanness and the obsession with money and with power that he stands for. And then there's Pope Leo, the Midwestern Chicago White Sox guy, who's very sort of modest, who stands for being humble and gracious,
Black heritage,
poor people,
and a registered Republican. He's a registered Republican
and
too.
He has a black. I don't mean to cut you up, but he's got a black heritage, because I have to point out that it's always black guys from Chicago that set Trump off and end up destroying him. But go ahead.
Well, and the other thing I was going to say, but it presents a remarkable choice, because if there's one person that has as big, if not a bigger stage or a bigger microphone in the world than the president of the United States, it's the Pope. And so, as Tony pointed out, I mean, the world has a choice now. Which direction are we going to follow? Are we going to continue to follow as Americans and as a globe? Are we going to follow the Donald Trump model? Or now we have this other guy, this other American we can follow, who I think stands for a certain kind of America that more of us believe in, even if we're not Catholic.
Well, that couldn't have been more purposeful if you had tried. I mean, again, and I'll kick it to you right away, Tony, but the tell, as they say, I wrote a piece, somewhat similar to what Tony wrote. And it was the fact that this guy had not been on Twitter in 2024, and he went on twice in 2025, once to rip JD Vance and once to rip Donald Trump. I mean, again, it ain't like they don't have opposition researchers like we do in politics who are looking at all of this. There was a direct message they were sending from by picking him. I have no doubt.
And I think also the message, and again, we will see what kind of leader that the Pope wants to be not just for the Catholic Church, but maybe for Americans who are non-Catholic. If he will step into the role to inspire people to speak out against fascism and even MAGA communism now with the prescription drugs. It's a real weird world we live in where MAGA is trying to be fascist and communist all at the same time. It's really weird. But I will say that this Pope has a lot of weight on his shoulders to do that. Now, whether he chooses to or not, and chooses to use that institution, the Catholic Church, and the billion followers that they have all around the world, if he chooses to use that, it could have a lot of weight in this country.
Well, there's no doubt, and around the world, because
absolutely,
Trump infects the world. Right, like it's not like
Cliff, you pointed out to me the other day there was the clip from News Nation where I guess it was the Monday. They had all thousands of journalists who got to sort of be in the same room with the Pope, and some of them got to be up front. And when the Pope left, they could throw questions at him. And you pointed out there was the correspondent from News Nation who said, Heavenly Father, do you have any message for the United States? And the Pope responded, many.
And maybe that's a sign.
A man, a few words, and that's all problems.
But I want to say though, maybe that is a sign that he plans on addressing those many things. It's just going to have to give him time, and I think we do have to give leaders a little bit of leeway and time, especially someone who holds the papacy, because they're not the leader of America. They're leader of a religious institution that sometimes they want to be political and sometimes they do not want to be political.
Well, they're also balancing a lot of stuff, right? We're not their only constituency. You know what I mean? Like he's got to there are conservatives embedded in the church, and he's got to keep that in mind, right? And watch. I mean, it's not quite The Godfather Part 3, I don't think.
Right. Well, and their political
danger around various corners.
Well, and their political capital is diametrically opposed a little bit to the people who would be anti-Trump. It's diametrically opposed a little bit. So there is a needle to thread for this new Pope, whether he participates in politics or not. But I will say this. I know you said about his social media post how they're anti-Trump and he's anti-JD Vance. I don't actually believe that to be true. I think he's pro-gospel. And that's the one thing that a lot of Christian nationalists
right.
And
those are the same things these days. It's just, as you know, there's a lot of fake Christians. You
can't
be pro-gospel and be pro-JD Vance.
Well, and that's the thing, is that this Pope is not really pro or anti-Trump or pro or anti-JD Vance. He is. It's pretty clear through his first mass that he had and some of the speeches that he's already given that he's going to be for the gospel, and they are challenging what is in the gospel.
Well, so, Donald Trump's the guy that takes the 30 pieces of silver, and I mean, come on, like
a $400 million jet from the people who, I mean, come on.
He takes the drapes down, then he takes the holy water and pours it in something. I mean, Donald Trump is about as opposite of the gospel as possible.
Right.
So I don't think, but I want to move on just because I didn't, I'm glad we're having a conversation about this, but I really wanted the topic to be about Tapper. Just because David has inside knowledge about things that having been a former.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get us off.
No.
Right.
This was a good conversation. I do from interactions with Jake Tapper in the past, having been in the Biden orbit somewhat. No, I wouldn't call myself, embedded, because 2020 there was because of COVID. We were all, we all were remote, so I wasn't around in the way I would have been, but I still know certain things. And when you combine Tapper's history and you combine what he wrote about the fact that he's choosing to do this about Joe Biden right now at this moment, it shows what an absolute fraud he is, which he's shown again.
I want to stop you right there because I want to set this up for, there may be some people watching who may not know that Jake Tapper, the anchor at CNN, he has written a book, right? He's written a book about Joe Biden. And the basic premise of his book is that the Biden White House and the Democrats lied repeatedly about Joe Biden's condition, and that was a terrible thing. So with that, and it's pretty, I've had my own opinions about Jake Tapper writing this book now after Biden's gone, when maybe this is a story that he should have been digging into if he felt like he could when Biden was president. But with that as a setup, Cliff, you take it away.
Well, you know what? And I think it's important to add something else to this too, David, which is it wasn't originally his book. It was that other chud, Alex Thompson's, who was going to do it, who kept attacking Biden during the whole thing. He was setting himself up. He had a book deal, Okay. And he was setting himself up because his expectation was that Biden was going to win. And then he would be able to come out with this book about you just elected someone who is, mentally deranged and knows nothing. That was Thompson's assumption. So he had to scramble when he did all this work and acted like an asshole constantly on Twitter. And then and all he cared about was the book deal. And Biden not Biden, Kamala Harris, we lost. So what happened? So this is how it's worse than it looked. Tapper signed on as a big name to join the book and be like, oh, well, now it's worth something because Jake Tapper's doing it. He just signed on for the money and for the, the play it would get. The book was already put together by Thompson. And, Tapper is somebody who I knew briefly, not well, thankfully, but when he lived in Adams Morgan and I lived in DuPont Circle in DC, one of my close friends from grad school was his roommate. His only aspiration he's writing for Salon. He wrote this whole thing on how the Republicans basically stole the 2000 election by what they did in Florida, Brooks Brothers riot, knocking on the doors, getting them to stop counting votes and all of that, which is probably somewhere close to what he really believes. But he would do what it took to get on TV, right? That's why he originally joined VH1. And I was told this by my friend who was there and multiple people that this is what Jake talked about constantly. TV. He wanted to be a big TV star. And he ended up getting his break with VH1 and went on to do that. And then got to the greater, whatever part of the monopoly was ABC, and then eventually CNN and what have you. But the way he has gone back and forth. So a classic example was when he first got to DC, he was a guy who worked for the Brady campaign and other stuff. Liberal side of the aisle, you'd say, okay, right, leans left, this and that. But you may also remember that he was the guy, and this, I remember being pissed for a long time about this. He was the guy who, when the Obama White House rightfully was like Fox News is propaganda and we're not letting them into our briefings, he led the crusade, the charge against Obama and he actually used these words, how should we sit here and allow you to kick our sister station out of, the briefings? And that's Jake Tapper. He's one of these, anything to get ahead, anything for the bigger contract, the bigger office, more status, more fame. And then I came across him later on when he came on my podcast I used to do. He agreed to come on because he had one of these books he writes about veterans on there. And I need to go back and get that footage because that'll really expose him for who he is. And I just decided I'm not going to be hostile, but I'm going to question him. And I asked him about that Fox News thing and he refused to answer it. Like he just refused. He wouldn't answer it. Like he almost wanted to act like he never said anything. And now he's back on, trying to kiss up to liberals again. He's with this whole thing. His whole thing became about veterans. But of course, with what he's doing with Biden right now, there's a guy in office right now who called veterans suckers and losers. When you said to John Kelly, why would they do it when there's nothing in it for them, who refused to go out to a ceremony in Normandy because he didn't want to get his hair wet, who insulted a Gold Star family, who's cutting $4 billion right now from the VA. So where we've got a crisis of, Fred Wellman's been leading this charge, who we had on our show on Substack. He's been, there's a crisis of suicides from PTSD and whatever. He's cutting that funding for mental health. Like, if Jake Tapper actually gave two shits about veterans, right now, in this moment, when there's a man saying, I'm not sure if I have to follow the Constitution, who's ignoring a 9-0 Supreme Court decision to bring a guy back, and who's ignoring the fact that it's Congress's right to deal with tariffs for some made-up emergency declaration that doesn't exist because there's no emergency, and God knows how many other ways. If he really believed anything he said, then maybe he'd think about the effect this guy is having on veterans he pretends to care about so much. But no, book sales are more important in show ratings. And, I could start reading it here.
David,
there are numerous defamation lawsuits against him and other things. He's not the guy everybody thinks he is. Go ahead.
David, because I want to ask you a question about journalism here, because I think at the heart of this, whether you like Tapper or don't like him or what he's saying or what he's not saying, I think this starts to really show that journalism is kind of broken in this country, because the right wing right now, their take on this is, well, Jake Tapper was complicit in this cover up. If he knew this stuff and he didn't report it,
right?
And really, they don't have that there's not a bad point there, that if what he's saying is true, and what the people who have told him in these supposed, I think 200 interviews, what I'm seeing here is about how many interviews he's done. If what they were saying was true, then why wasn't Jake Tapper reporting it when he knew it? Was he doing this just to sell the book? Or what is, and how is journalism broken here? Because I think that breaks that code of ethics for us, the people, when Jake Tapper, not that he's trying to capitalize now that Joe Biden has lost, which, I mean, if Joe Biden had won, if he'd stayed in the race and he had won, was Jake Tapper going to hold this book until the end of Joe Biden?
Well, he wouldn't have put his name on the book. That's the thing. It was Alex Thompson's book.
Well, right, but here's what I'm
need
saying.
More firepower in the name, like more fame attached to it. Once the whole book was written, in a way that was based on Biden winning.
But I guess that's my question here to David, because he served as a journalist. I mean, we've watched videos of him in a suit and a tie during the Oklahoma City bombing here on this show. So,
and what a young, handsome man he was.
How is this looking at it through the lens of journalism, not through the lens of Jake Tapper being famous, being on CNN, but is the right wing's criticism of Jake Tapper here kind of correct? Where they're
I just say one quick thing, and it's only because David won't say it, which is seriously, you've got journalists on this side, Phil Donahue, David Schuster, Jim Acosta. There's more I'm not thinking of, who refuse to play the game, who have honor and integrity and believe in journalism. It's not because they're partisans. They believe in telling the truth, and they're the ones who get forced out. And then there's the Jake Tappers on this other side. And I think that is crucial to this conversation. And David won't say
I think that's really what I'm asking. Is journalism broken? Is journalism
right? And now I'll let David say the rest, because David.
Well, to your point, yes, I think journalism is broken for a couple of reasons. First of all, to the point that you guys are just talking about in terms of why, and what the right has been saying, why wasn't Jake Tapper and this other guy Thompson reporting this while Biden was president? That's a legitimate question. If they had even the string to try to put this story together, they should have been doing that. And Jake Tapper had the platform and the resources to be going after that. So that's the first thing. It almost smacks like, well, Biden was president. Maybe Jake Tapper was trying to curry favor with the Biden administration. So wait until the guy has lost, and then you can kick him when he's down. The other problem that I have with all this is that when you listen to sort of Jake Tapper sort of justify why this is coming out now, and he says, well, we didn't have all the reporting that we have now with these 200 interviews, and it is news. It is journalism to be able to tell this story about what looked like some sort of cover-up. And my problem is, well, yes, I think it is journalism and the story should be told, but Jake Tapper has no integrity on that point. And when I go back to is Jake Tapper, who's now claiming to be the paragon of journalism with this book, is the same guy who just about a year ago was tasked by CNN to moderate the Biden-Trump debate, he and Dana Bash.
Yep.
And initially, from what I understand, is that Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, who could fact-check Biden and Donald Trump in real time, they know these issues as well as anybody. They could know where the lies were going to be, that when they suggested, okay, we're going to fact-check, CNN said, oh, no. You're not going to fact-check. You're just going to ask the question, tee it up, and then sit back. And initially, I'm told that either Dana Bash or Jake Tapper, or maybe both, said, no, wait a second, our reputations are on the line. We can fact check in real time. We can do this. And CNN said to them, if you're going to moderate this debate, you're going to do as we say. You're not going to fact check. You're just going to ask questions. And Jake and Dana at that point thought, okay, well, this is perhaps the biggest opportunity of their professional career. They'll get more people watching them in this debate than they've ever had. Do they really want to just put up a fight and then have CNN replace them, have somebody else moderate the debate? So they said, okay, we'll just ask the questions. And they were counting on President Biden doing the fact checking. And when Biden did not, and Jake Tapper and Dana Bash stayed silent, then they became complicit in what was a total abdication of journalistic responsibility. And to me, for Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, given the resources and the money, the power, the prestige they have, for them to cave to corporate management and to cave to the Trump campaign and to agree, oh no, we're not going to do any fact checking, to me that is outrageous. Because if they're willing to cave and abdicate their journalistic responsibility, how is somebody who is covering a city hall or a mayor who's not making a ton of money, who's working for a newspaper or local television station, how are they supposed to stand up for journalism ethics? And to me, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, as so many people have pointed out, they dropped the ball. They abdicated their journalistic responsibility during that debate. And so for Jake Tapper now to come back and say, well, I'm standing up for journalism by telling the story. That is a bunch of bullshit.
And
Somebody
I know
else
for a
should have
fact,
told the
David,
story. Jake Tapper should have had nothing to do with this.
and I know for a fact, David, knowing you, that at that moment when they say you can't fact check is the moment you walk out of the room.
Right.
Is the moment you say, no, that's not a debate. That's not what I'm willing to do. Let me just let me tell you just a very quick story here, okay? I obviously I've told people before, the one time I was paid regularly by a TV station, just to let you know how great left-wing media is, it was by the Sinclair Broadcast Network. I was the liberal analyst on the station debating Armstrong Williams and this coterie of other freak right-wingers, all right? And I used to sort of have fun and consider it a challenge because they're so dumb that you want to take on two of them. Maybe that makes like one brain, right? But that's not where I'm headed here. Their Baltimore headquarters, the Smith brothers, who are billionaires, shocker, for Sinclair, they had their New York bureau chief come out of there. His name was John Lieberman, terrific guy. He, as he said, he considered himself down the middle, admitted to me privately at one point he had voted for George W. Bush. So he certainly was not a liberal, but in 2000, but thought, this was in 2004, I should have said that for the election, but thought Bush had gone too far to the right, that he considered himself a moderate, and all of that. And he wanted to be objective in his reporting. So he went to Iraq to get stories, risked his life. Okay. He came back and you may remember that was when Sinclair Ted Koppel was reading the names on Nightline of the soldiers dying in Iraq. And Sinclair refused to do it on their ABC-owned affiliates. Well, that was related to what John Lieberman wanted to do. He wanted to tell these stories about what he saw in Iraq, and they told him, absolutely not. Only good stories that help President Bush, kill all the ones that don't. And they said, you can be quiet about it and stay here, and we're good. You can be quiet about it, and we'll give you a severance payment or whatever to walk away, or we'll see you in court. And John Lieberman, a man who had to think about his career, who is a few years younger than me, and this is, again, 20 years ago. So he's in his late 20s, early 30s. He said he came out publicly to the Baltimore Sun and a bunch of other places and blasted them and told everybody what they were intending to do, that they were being dishonest, that they were doing this and that. They sued him. He ended up settling, and he's had a good career. He went to New York. He, in fact, even was for a while was a correspondent for Howard Stern. He was a correspondent he wrote a book on Whitey Bulger. He was a correspondent for America's Most Wanted and a few other places. But the point is that's what he risked. He may have lost his career in broadcast journalism because he wouldn't do that.
Right.
And that is who I want doing these kinds of jobs.
Can I say one thing? And then I got to go. And David, I'll throw it to you here because you have a lot more experience in having the title of press than we do.
Yeah.
I might be media. I consider myself a commentator, but I am not a journalist. And I'm definitely not the press considered in that category. But the press is in the Constitution. And there's a reason for it. You said that they advocated their duty as journalists. And their duty is not to CNN. Their duty is not to the guild of other journalists to prove that they have moxie to compete amongst other journalists and other broadcasters. Their duty is to us, the people in the Constitution, and their duty is to report to us what is happening so that we can make decisions. And our decision is under Article 1. And that is really where the majority of the attacks are coming from. The Article 2 part of the Constitution, the executive branch right now is attacking Article 1, and our Congress is staying silent. Now, there's a lot of silence on the right, of course, because there's capitulation to Donald Trump's agenda, but there's also a lot of silence on the left from Democrats, and it is up to us, because at the very top of that document, it says 3 words. It says, "We, the people." So there might be the 3 branches of government. We have of course, the legislative branch, which is Article 1, the executive branch, which is Article 2, and the legislative branch, which is Article 3. But we are at the very top. We are the first 3 words, "we the people." And I believe that is the press's duty. That is their job. And it is in the Constitution that they must report to us the truth that they know when they know it. So that way we can make proper decisions when self-governing our nation. And exactly. I think that is the thing that might get lost here in in the conversation of who likes Tapper and who doesn't like Tapper. Or
Well, let's make sure it's not about Tapper's personality here.
Well,
because
that's what I'm
there are
saying.
other
That's what
people-
I'm trying. That's the case
Yeah.
that I'm trying to make. That it's not really even about Jake Tapper. It is about the institution of the press and where do we stand with independent journalism, independent media, and the press in general. And is our press broken because the billionaires have raided our Constitution and the billionaires have bought out the possibility of saying, hey, you don't get to talk about George Bush and the bad stuff that are happening in that war. You don't get to talk about this. You don't get to fact check this. You don't get to do this and you don't get to do that because our interest is in profit and our corporation, not in the interest of the people in the Constitution. I think that's where we're coming into collision of how we're having this discourse around this book in particular.
And I would argue there was a time when CNN actually could do both be profitable and speak on behalf of the American people and do journalism on behalf of the American people. When I think about the early 1990s, I was there as an assignment editor, producer, and the correspondents that were there, and Frank Sesno and Charles Bierbauer, and Bernie Shaw and Candy Crowley. I mean, the people who I had no idea what their politics was, but I knew that they were going to report like hell, report the facts, and let the chips fall where they may. And they felt it was their duty to the people to do that. And Ted Turner, who was the owner, he made a fortune out of CNN. He also believed in that, and he wouldn't interfere with the journalists. And when I left CNN and went to local news, and you mentioned Little Rock, there was an investigation story that I did in Arkansas, at KATV, in the mid-1990s, in which we revealed the incredible corruption that existed in the mobile home industry and how they'd essentially bought a state commission and they were rewarding themselves and they were screwing over consumers. It was a 5-part series that we did night after night. And after
There had
part
to be some
3,
Huckabees involved, right?
well, the Huckabee's lieutenant governor, he ended up living.
Yeah,
the
see,
whole
I
other
knew it.
question.
I knew
But
it.
Jim
Somehow
Guy
he's
Tucker,
there.
who was the
Okay.
governor at the time, like he appointed the commissioner's banker, insurance agent were on the board. I mean, it was so corrupt. After the third night of this story, the mobile home industry pulled all of their ads from KATV, the number one television station in Arkansas, made more money off of mobile home industry ads than anybody else. All the ads got pulled. And I'll never forget, the general manager came down to the newsroom, Dale Nicholson, may he rest in peace. What a great guy. He came down and he said, Schuster, I just want you to know that the mobile home industry pulled all their advertisements because of the stories that you've been doing. But I want to tell you, that's fine. We've got other advertisers that will take their place. Fuck them. And keep doing what you're doing. And I'm thinking, this is what journalism's all about. He was a successful business, a successful station that knew it would make money because of the quality of the journalism it was doing. It was not going to curry favor with anybody, with its journalists. And I was being told, you have carte blanche, you do the story. And that's what I imagined, and that's what I knew CNN to be in the early 90s. And that's what I saw in my local station. And I think I then started to view the media perhaps through rose-colored glasses, and perhaps was a little bit late to seeing how the dynamics had shifted in cable news and broadcast news and local news stations when these Sinclairs and other big billionaire-run organizations started coming in and saying, no, we don't care about the journalism for the people. We care about scratching the back of our founders or our supporters or our advertisers or the people who we're in bed with politically. And to me, that's where journalism has gone, and that's where CNN has gone, which is why Jake Tapper and Dana Bash at the debate in June of 2024, they made a bargain, a horrible bargain. They're like, oh, we're just going to assume that Joe Biden will do the fact checking and we'll benefit so much from all the attention that we get, and everybody's going to know who we are. And it blew up in their faces. And instead of that night, they could have just said, screw CNN management. We're going to fact check Donald Trump because this is so outrageous with what he's saying. They were silent. And when they were silent, they threw journalism out the window.
Agreed. Did you see what I sent you, Tony?
Yeah.
Can you put that in? I can still do video files. I don't know how when it's a link. In there, that Newsweek piece, there is a video of Tapper's deposition. And everyone should, it's the sort of thing you have to hear now in light of his what he's doing right now, because it's just such self-serving bullshit.
Yeah, we can try it. Hey, give me just.
Look, I don't want to. This isn't just about Jake Tapper at CNN.
No,
I think I've told
but-
this story before about Brett Baer and a story that he decided not to do in 2000 on the Florida recount for Fox News when there was this whole sort of conservative theory about what had happened on election night,
Right.
and Brett Baer found out that no, that wasn't true. And I said, Brett, you're going to report the facts, right? No, I can't do that because that'll upset the conservative pundits on this channel. What? Well, I knew then that Brett was going to do very well at Fox News because that's the kind of journalist who's
That's
not
what they wanted.
the kind of soldier that Roger Ailes wanted.
No, I want to be clear. Look, I'm only bringing up the Tapper stuff now, and I think this needs to be driven through because there is a key point here. When you create a culture that's been created in our newsrooms, when it's only about who can get the most clicks, who can make them the most money, who has the most sensationalism, truth doesn't matter anymore, and all of that. It's not that I'm going after Jake Tapper's personality per se. It's that though certain people, let's call it with certain flexible morality, if you will, are the ones who get ahead, as you were saying about Brett Baer, and it's the David Schusters and the Jim Acostas that we lose. Now, thankfully, David Schuster and Jim Acosta are on Substack now, which I fully expect to keep growing and to overtake as regular media like CNN dies, corporate media, monopoly media, because of these kinds of scandals. But my point is that is why, it's the Jake Tapper thing is only important because it's not like I don't remember the last time I did any negative story on him. I've covered a bunch of other media personalities. So again, I'm not picking on him except for he is important today to this story, but there's many others of him out there.
Well, and Cliff, it gets to, there's one other point about Jake, though, that is related to all this that you mentioned, and that it's sort of, by Jake Tapper doing this book now and behaving as he did with the presidential debate, it calls into question everything that Jake has done. So when Jake writes these books about veterans, is he doing it because he really wants their stories to be told and feels an affinity to veterans? I mean, Jake Tapper, as you pointed out, grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. He never served in the military.
Upper middle class background, no
service, armed forces, as far as I know. Or is he just doing this because, well, that'll play well, that'll help his reputation with people if he does a story telling veteran stories?
I'm sure of that, and I think I can say this, and and you probably can too, David. I'm just going to say it. He's an upper middle class Jewish guy who wants to up his toughness factor, who grew up in the suburbs with money, and the way you do that is you sign on with all the veterans and you act like you're tough. But the moment that you can write this story on Biden, and again, the reason why this is even, we haven't even mentioned yet the fact that there were numerous stories, and there should have been so many more on Trump's mental acuity or lack thereof, that you could, that for whatever Biden, and I'm not going to be biased here. I worked for Biden in 2020. I initially did not think and don't think he should have run in 2024. And I'm not saying that in hindsight. He had run originally as somebody who was a bridge to the next generation of Democrats. I think he should have kept that. So I'm not sitting here just as somebody who's like, you're attacking my old boss or, something like that. I think Biden did a great job domestically and some other things, but this is no loyalty to Biden. This has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that right, what he's doing now and what he did during the election, how can it be a scandal they didn't cover Biden enough if they didn't cover, Donald Trump almost at all? A guy that was obsessively talking about sharks and batteries every frickin', speech he had, when he wasn't lying, stealing, showing all of his other lack of personality traits and character for this position. So that just gets me too.
I got the clip ready.
If
you want to click if you want to click down there to bring it up on stage.
Yep.
I will say while you're bringing that up on stage, I think this again is about the constitutional obligation of the press and journalists everywhere. It doesn't matter if I don't give a good goddamn Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Barack Obama,
Yep.
George W. Bush. I don't give a damn who it is. If there is information out there that the American public should know about what is going on inside and the people who are running our government, and that is something that the American people should know, there is a constitutional obligation for them to do that. It has nothing to do with the name, the broadcaster, what channel they're on, or who they're covering, or what beat they do or do not cover on. It is about their constitutional obligation to be a journalist. That's why I say I'm not a journalist, because my constitutional obligation is to just to ramble on for hours and hours about other people's constitutional obligation. I'll play this clip.
No, I'll say it quickly, and I think that's important, Tony, because that's why I also, whenever anybody tries to call me a journalist, I reject the that label, because I'm like, no, that is not a fair and accurate depiction of what I am. I've done acts of journalism. I wrote a book on McCain where I found some things some others had not. That but and I have maybe in some columns I've written. But all I will promise people is that I'm not going to lie. I will deal in facts. I will tell you what I know. And yeah, I have a perspective based upon a lot of years and looking at a lot of policy, especially at this moment in time, that most of what the right is saying is utter horseshit and what doesn't work and has been tried again and again and fails. And that doesn't make me partisan. That makes me objective and honest. Saying.
Well, and I'll tell you that even at my publication on Substack, which if you're on Substack right now, you should go subscribe to the Kaufman Chronicle. But even my publication, I let my editor do what my editor does, and the reason why is because I do not want to put my finger on any scale if that scale so affect the way people view what the facts are. Even in my back and forth against support of Bernie Sanders, I am very vocal about I do not believe that Bernie Sanders is the way forward with the Democratic Party. I do not believe that his brand fits well with what I view as a little bit of the readjustment of parties and a realignment of parties in this country, where we are moving away from authoritarian federalist type president, and we're moving towards more the country wanting to have an anti-federalist, more Jeffersonian type view of the country. I don't believe Bernie Sanders fits that mold. And so that's my opposition. Now, my editor has a different opinion, and I let her publish that even in my publication. I let her publish that dissent. And that is important to journalism, that those opinions be laid bare, because facts are facts, but also there are opinions, and opinions should be heard. We have the freedom of speech in this country, but we shouldn't pretend that opinions are facts. So I'll play
that David supported Bernie and I supported Hillary, and here we are somehow good friends because people can have different opinions. I think that's what being liberal, being open-minded, however you want to use that word, transparency, all that is about, which is yes, you rely on facts. Yes, you rely on science. Yes, but we'll have different opinions about how the government should use those things. And that's okay.
Right. It is okay. And we should do it civilly. Here's the clip of Jake Tapper. It's about 2 minutes long.
Mr. Tapper, I'm going to share with you now a video recording of your presentation at the Ford School of Public Policy.
And I think the question is, if all you care about is clicks and newsstand sales and circulation, and you don't care at all about the truth and the facts, you end up with a settlement with Dominion election system, right? So, I mean, that's... Yeah. There's nothing wrong with wanting people to read your newspaper, wanting people to watch your show. But if all you care about is that, and you don't care about the responsibility, the grave responsibility we have to be fair and to be honest, then you are a cancer on the democracy we have.
Do you still agree with your previous statements?
Yes.
I want to push back on that, Mr. Tapper, because I'm just talking here about whether or not a news organization that tells willful lies is a cancer on society. Can you answer that question?
I mean, you can think whatever you want.
Ask for your testimony, Mr. Tapper.
I answered your question. I made a statement about the non-hypothetical, months-long campaign against Dominion voting, against Smartmatic, against all the people that participated in the process in 2020. It was a months-long campaign that was undermining democracy for the benefit of one particular political leader. And that comment I made, and I stand by it, but I don't have answers to extend the metaphor to every single person, organization, and situation in journalism.
Not even himself, apparently.
Well, yeah. So it's interesting because I guess it depends who's the one who's profiting from undermining democracy and all of that in Jake Tapper's mind.
Here's the problem, that this issue that we have right now of people, shading the truth or not telling the truth or being selective about when they report things. We have that now, and we have that right now at the broadcast networks and even at CNN with Jake Tapper and cable news. And here's what I mean. There have been a number of stories, and Cliff, you mentioned it during 2024, and there have been a number of stories that, we independent media have done about the signs of Donald Trump's dementia. Now, we're not examining Donald Trump, but we have countless clips where Donald Trump repeats himself, where Donald Trump can't grasp a name or a word, where Donald Trump forgets things, where he
thought
conflates
Nikki
things that
Haley
are
was the
totally
one running
unrelated.
security on January 6th. I mean, these were things that were not even just that, like they were way, way off.
Right. And so between Donald Trump's, all the things that he's saying these days, and there are people who work for Donald Trump right now who believe that he has dementia, that he has some sort of neurological disorder. These are people who work for him at the White House, but you will never see, and you have not seen that story on any of the broadcast networks, not on CNN, maybe a little bit on MSNBC. The people who have been carrying the baton on that are independent media. We did a video a week ago about signs of Trump's dementia that sort of took off. There's some other independent media that are also doing it. Those are the only places that are putting this together. Why is that? If it was okay for Jake Tapper to write a book now about what Joe Biden was experiencing in 2024 and the efforts to hide it, why isn't Jake Tapper using his resources? Why isn't CNN putting this together now about the current president of the United States?
Right, the one who could do the damage with his dementia right now. Right?
We all know why, because Donald Trump has shown that he's going to go to war against Harvard and Columbia and scientists and the facts. Anybody who stands in Donald Trump's way, he's going to war against them. CNN doesn't want to go to war to that extent against Donald Trump. CBS tried to a little bit with 60 Minutes, and look what happened to their executive producer. So as a result, there is no reporting on CNN by Jake Tapper about the signs of Donald Trump's dementia that we see and the people who work for him at the White House who believe that he has dementia. You will not hear that story on CNN. And that's a problem, because it means that this continues. This problem that we have with broken journalism, as Tony pointed out, it is continuing to this day.
Well, I'll have to say, if he reports that, David, he won't be able to write another book about Trump's decline in 4 years.
That's true. Don't talk about it now. Wait till later. You get yourself a book.
I just want to point that out, that beyond sidestepping their constitutional obligation here, a lot of times they hold these. I criticized Jonathan Karl for many months for holding information that the American people should have known when he was holding it for a book and for profit, it seemed. And I think sometimes the market of information and the world of information that we live in today, this information is very valuable. And if they can profit off the information by withholding it from the American people so they can drop bombs when they can profit the most, I think that is probably the thing.
And the context is so important. I mean, you brought up the dementia story and obviously the context of that, which is all of these staffers and all these, and where are the reports on it? Where is all that? And where was it during the campaign? Again, I mean, the man told multiple stories about sharks and batteries, and I made jokes about them, but that's probably a point to start asking questions. What is wrong with you? He thought, Nancy Pelosi was Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley was the one guarding the Capitol that day. Mm-hmm. He thought he was running against Barack Obama. These are just some of the things that I remember.
And it's up to us. It's up to us, though. It's up to us in the independent media. Because during the Biden administration, if you watch Fox News, you would think Biden was just a pile of Jell-O.
Of course.
That he had no cognitive ability whatsoever. And it's up to us because, like David said, CNN, MSNBC, none of these outlets are going to do it. So it's up to us to do it.
Let me add that context right now, because I feel like it's, again, a classic example of where they fail, which is I just wrote, I think a few days ago, it was a Substack I wrote on the whole, Qatari plane, thing. And I mean, utterly ridiculous on its face, emoluments clause, the rest of that and whatever. And you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, both Tony and David and anybody else in the chat here. But I've looked and I have not seen anywhere else the context, because this is what they refuse to do, is provide people with any context for an understanding of how bad something is versus something else. That Jared Kushner was underwater in the obviously purposely numbered 666 Fifth Avenue building that he bought, way underwater with the crash and other things, and that they had private meetings with Qatar. And there was a blockade for a bit that the State Department didn't even know about. You may remember this from the first Trump administration, where they were threatening Qatar if they didn't bail Jared out. Now, that is a fact that's been reported. How do you not bring that context to this situation? How do you act like this plane is a one-off? You know what I mean? How do you not tell people also that the Qatari government rented whole floors of the Trump hotel and that, that crappy bedbug hotel in DC when he used to have it? And where no one came to stay, they just rented out the floor. Like, how can you not educate people about that? Why is that left to me to do?
Can I tell you what it's starting to feel like to me? It's starting to feel like Donald Trump is switching sides to Hamas, is what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I'm
Well,
serious. I mean,
Ben Shapiro thinks
it's getting very, very difficult for him to thread this needle with Bibi Netanyahu and what he's doing by starving children in Gaza. So, I think Donald Trump is doing the bidding of the Qatari Hamas, and they're bribing
gave him money,
$400 million plane to switch his support. So I got to go, fellas.
More people should point
I
out
don't
that
mean to drop that
context, too.
bomb. I don't mean to drop that bomb in this conversation.
No, but more people should point out that context too. That the Qatari government was housing the top leaders of Hamas who are living there. How, in what way does that $400 million gift affect anything we would do to stop the Hamas mass murderers?
Well,
I don't know. Just might affect it.
And to
Go
me,
ahead, David.
the journalism aspect of this is even sort of simpler. Maybe it requires some investigative reporting to sort of, understand where Hamas is in relation to Qatar. It does not require any deep journalistic pockets or investigative reporting to read the emoluments clause.
There you go. The
Article
Constitution,
1, Section 9, Clause 8, or maybe it's Section 8, Clause 9, whatever it is. It is clear.
It
So
says
it is clear. You cannot accept a gift from a king or foreign government, whatever it is, without
King,
congressional
Prince, or
approval.
foreign government. It's all three. David, speaking of CNN, and I got to go. Scott Jennings, I believe it was Scott Jennings on CNN, couldn't say, no, it was O'Leary. That's who it was. It was O'Leary on CNN last night with Phillips, who didn't know what the emoluments clause was. It's
And never mind.
Well, David's
O'Leary or
first
Jennings
column.
and the rest of the pundits. My issue is when a journalist says experts say that this is not allowed. No. It's not experts say. The Constitution says. And any journalist who's falling into this, well, experts say this is not allowed. That is a journalist who is trying to curry favor with the Trump administration and soften whatever blow of reporting on this negative story about Donald Trump. A journalist who has no fear, who is simply reporting the facts, reporting the truth, and letting it fall where they may, is somebody who's going to say, this is what the Constitution says. This is bad. And because of what the Constitution says, either Congress votes on this and approves it, or Donald Trump is committing an illegal act. If a journalist is going to hide behind, well, experts say, or constitutional scholars say, or legal experts say, that is a journalist who is a wussy, who is perpetuating the problem we've been talking about for the last hour.
I think so. And I've got to go, fellas. It's good to see you. And audience, it's good to see you.
Take it easy.
See you
I
guys.
enjoyed your 10 minutes today, Tony.
Yeah, sure.
I love when we keep you longer.
Yeah, well, when David's
Good
here,
work,
I
Tony.
always want to stay longer.
I know.
All
I know
right,
you
Cliff.
never do with me, you dick.
All right. We'll see you, fellas.
Take it
Bye-bye.
easy. I'm
Well,
not sure
Cliff,
we
you
even
and I
have
are
that
going
much
to be
more
following
time,
Tony
David.
before long, but final thoughts?
Yeah. I can't stay that much longer. I know that I do have to go pick up a child at school in a relatively short period of time. Well, it's just it's like I get angry. I make my jokes, I do my whatever. We go through our thing, but from a more sort of reflective perspective, I mean, it's just sad. It's such a sad place we're in. The movie Network just predicted the whole damn thing. It seems. I don't know if a lot of people know, but maybe they do, that news used to be something where it was not about profit, that for the privilege of getting licenses given to them by the government, the major news networks accepted the fact that news was something they had to provide. And if they could even break even, it was cool. But they were going to lose some money because their job, again, Constitution, they were expected to inform us. And that all went away. Part of it's, many, many factors there. Part of it was CNN doing 24-hour news. Part of it's, the creation of Fox News obviously changed CNN from what it had been. When you talked about it, I remember you said in the early 90s, that's so key, because Fox News goes online in 96. And nothing's ever the same after that, because now they have to compete and they don't want to look bad and look like they're getting their butts kicked. But in the end, it's been destroyed, and I don't really know how you fix it. Again, it's why I'm such an advocate for independent media, and not just because I'm like, hey, Cliff Schecter's media or David Schuster's or Tony Michaels, everyone out there. And you're going to see, because I'll be featuring a lot more smaller creators and a lot more people who are, on Substack, other platforms, who are people on the left who are creating great stuff that I don't think are getting enough airtime, because I don't know that corporate media, monopoly media, call it what you will, for-profit media, I don't know that most of it can be saved. I think there's a few exceptions, but not for the most part.
I agree 100%. I think what I refer to them as the mainstream media is a lost cause. I think it's broken beyond repair. There's no coming back. However, and I do want to leave people on some good news. The good news is what you just mentioned. There are platforms where independent, fearless journalists who just want to report the truth can be found, can be supported, whether it's Substack or other platforms. And even if people say, well, wait a second, Schuster, your videos on YouTube or whatever, maybe YouTube changes the algorithm. It becomes supportive of Donald Trump and depresses videos like yours that are reporting these sort of things that nobody else will report. Yeah, that's possible, but maybe YouTube also is going to curry favor, and other organizations like Facebook will curry favor with the Trump administration. But as long as there are some platforms like Substack that are simply going to let us report the truth, then journalists who are doing this, whether it's us, whether it's my friend Keith Olbermann, who's got a really successful podcast and he's totally fearless, as long as there's at least one platform, and there are several platforms now where journalists can do this, hope springs eternal. And this, we the people, reporting for the people as opposed to reporting for the profits and the clicks, that is still possible. And so don't give up hope, folks.
Right.
There are still platforms out there. You just have to work a little bit harder, as opposed to just, turning on your TV to the local network affiliate.
I'd say quickly that YouTube is something that still, I think, is very useful in a number of ways. We keep putting up videos. You're doing them at my channel, which is great. Our channel, I should call it at this point. You've put it up enough. I'm doing it. But I do have to say the one thing so far that I absolutely love about Substack, and it's not like versus YouTube, it's versus everybody else, which is no algorithm.
Yes.
No needing to put shocking in big letters. And if for all you folks out there who think like, oh, Cliff, why do you do that? I do that because they have an algorithm. And when I do that, it tells me to do that. And they may not share my video if I don't do that. I don't want to name them what I name them. I don't want to, and that frustrates the hell out of me. But that's the beauty. It is the beauty of at least so far at Substack, is that they have humans who look at who likes your stuff, and they share your stuff with those people, and they make your stuff more available based on humans, seeing other humans liking the quality of your work. And I will take that over an algorithm any day. So,
Cliff, enjoy the afternoon.
Right.
Thanks as always. Great show. To everybody watching,
you.
Thanks for watching. We appreciate it.
Take care, bud. I will let you out. Oh, what did I do? All right, that's it. David is gone. I'm going to have to leave probably in about 5 minutes or so. I've got, I'll see if there's some good comments you guys have, but I do have to pick up a child at school. And, you don't like leaving children alone just to sit there by themselves at school. It feels kind of mean. What else you guys got for me? There of course were other stories. I've even seen some, a story about how some Republicans are now getting angry at Trump for the fact that the Qatari plane took over the news cycle and makes them look corrupt and whatever. But it's the usual. They're upset with them about the fact that it makes them look bad. I do want to ask you to please read my Substack piece today. It is not up yet. It will be up right after we're done here. It's all edited and everything. And basically the premise of it is, and this is why I think you guys will like it, it is on Vladimir Zelensky. And I compare him to FDR and to Clemenceau, other great leaders of the past. I truly believe we're witnessing something that is, if we get all through all this, we will look back at Zelensky as being such the right man at the right time that he maybe saved the current world order. Because if Russia ends up going in and taking over Ukraine, and if Zelensky had been one of these cowardly leaders and had run away, if he didn't have this amazing combination of humility and strength and charisma and fight in him, ability to communicate and all that, if they take over, Russia takes over Ukraine, I can tell you this, they're maybe not done. They start eyeing other countries. China starts sort of gazing across the Taiwan Strait and saying, huh, well, Russia got away with that. Maybe we can. It just the negative consequences of all of that, not to mention the fact that he's been able to smartly handle Trump, push back without getting in a big fight with Trump because he can't afford that. I do think, again, I don't agree with everything the Pope is in favor of course, but I think in the Pope and in Zelensky, we may have two sort of historic figures right now who can be counterweights in terms of an overall morality to so many of these thugs that are running. I mean, really, most of the major countries of the world right now, in terms of certainly in terms of either square miles or in terms of population size or so. I mean, if you think about Modi, I'm probably mispronouncing the name, who is a thug, and Xi, who is a thug, and Trump, who's a thug, and you add the populations of those three countries, you're at almost half the earth, which is depressing to think about. So, pretty cool that that we have somebody who really is sort of two people, and so. Please go check out the Substack. Please subscribe. Jim was kind enough to just put it up. He also put up my Twitch, which is fantastic. Oh, Patreon's up there too. Wow, we got it all. And I forget sometimes my folks at Twitch. I know that Hal Sparks sent a bunch of you over. Thank you for joining the raid and coming over here and watching. It is much appreciated. I'm learning Twitch better and better. Who knows, man? Maybe I'll just become a gamer. It looks like more fun. I need to become good at some kind of a game though first. So you'll have to tell me what it is. Is there anything else? Anyone else? What are you saying here? Humility is such a loaded word. I don't look at it that way. You've right to your opinion, and that's okay. I look at humility as somebody, he has the strength to sit in the Oval Office and look these guys in the eye, this punk, JD Vance is attacking him and whatever, and fight back as hard and says, maybe you're not looking at, I don't remember the remark he made to Trump, but it was pretty good about how wrong Trump was. He has the strength to challenge Putin and put Putin in a trap by challenging him to meet him in Istanbul, person to person. Don't bring all of these people over, and said, don't, something along the lines of, don't be scared or whatever. So he locks Putin in a box. And again, the piece goes into a lot more detail on this, where Putin either shows up, and if he shows up, then Zelensky is sitting on an equal plane to him. So they can't just dismiss Zelensky as, oh, that silly comedian and that, whatever. He's put next to Putin. Or Putin doesn't show up and he gets to call him a coward. It's win-win, honestly. And it was a brilliant maneuver. And I'm just saying, so being humble, having humility doesn't take away from strength. The beauty is he has all of these qualities. His humility in that he's kind. He doesn't stand up and brag and say, Ukraine's awesome, man. Make Ukraine great again. I'm the best. Ukraine? We're the best. You want to go to Ukraine? You want to go to Zelensky University? I got Zelensky ties. Hey, do you need some Zelensky steaks? That's what I mean by the humility. I don't know. I guess everybody gets a right to their own opinion when it comes to these things. I don't see it as loaded. So what else we got? Not a ton more. I do have to hit the road soon. So hopefully we got you the goods on Jake Tapper. Didn't want to have to do it, but I'm sick of it at this point. Sheldon Hughes, of course, has gifted a membership. So I have to do my usual as I'm walking out. Is anyone coming with me? Who's coming with me? Look, a great hour and almost 15 minutes of entertainment. Emmy Award winner David Schuster, Tony Michaels here, some behind-the-scenes information on Tapper, some behind-the-scenes information on the Biden situation. This is how we do it, guys. If you support us, it is hugely helpful. I hate asking, but it is what it is. And frankly, if you're willing to go and become a paid subscriber at Substack, that'd be my favorite thing in the world, because that is where we're growing rapidly. But even any, how about this? I'm not going to even ask for a bunch of stuff. How about one 99-cent super sticker? There's Sheldon Hughes with the $2. Of course. Thank you, Sheldon. That's it. See, it's a positive note we get to walk out on and say, hey, you know what I mean? I really appreciate you doing that. Anybody else who has a super sticker or super chat, nothing is too small, 99 cents or anything. It all adds up and lets us do more. More of this we do, more we get to pay the folks like David Schuster to contribute. More of this you get. That's how it goes. But I think that's that's what we got for today. So sometimes you guys, it ends up that I'm on the way out, and see, there it is. Even as I'm saying it, thank you, Lefty Gramps, for the $3 super sticker. Appreciated, very much appreciated. It often happens when you guys do that when I'm leaving after I've done my little spiel of who's coming with me, who's coming with me. But for this time, I hope you enjoyed today's broadcast. Hope you've been enjoying Matt's. Tomorrow, we have Amped Up with Cliff Schechter. That will be only on Substack, so you do have to come to Substack to watch it. MJ, $5 payday tomorrow. Thank you, MJ. But remember, and I often try to say this too, if it is something where you have to have payday to be able to do it, and it's a strain on you, then don't. I don't want anybody to put themselves in a financial strain, just those who obviously have the resources. All I can say to you is that is incredibly kind, MJ, and I really appreciate it. But I do remind folks that as much as I want folks who get something out of this and can afford it to help contribute to what I'm doing, make sure that it's within your means. In any case, Amped Up with Cliff Schechter, my show. David Schuster will be there. We may have a second guest tomorrow. I know we have one, Jimmy Jim's 99-cent super sticker. Thank you so much. We have Jeff Pearlman. If you're not familiar with him, he had a book turned into a TV show called, Showtime on the Lakers in the 80s. He's written about both sports and its in combination with politics. So some of it's been strictly sports. I think mostly strictly, like the 86 Mets. I'd love to talk to him and find out some of the stuff they were snorting in the clubhouse there. But he wrote a book on Brett Favre, who has taken a move into politics, and he wrote a book about the USFL and how Donald Trump's prescription for destroying the USFL is exactly what he's doing to the country. So he connects these things from the past, because you may know Donald Trump got very involved in the USFL. I think he owned the New Jersey Generals. That's how he met Herschel Walker, and the rest is a sad history. So Substack. Be there tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern. David Schuster, Jeff Pearlman, probably one other person. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for supporting everything I do, as always. As the sun sets slowly in the west, I bid you a fond farewell.